everyone, and welcome back to Talking Points with KPI, episode number 50. So last week we went over winter training in college. Today we'll be going over pro pitchers winter training. So if you listened to last week, we kind of talked about the overall aspect of winter training and how important it is for these college athletes. Today we're going to go into the pro side, and this is even more important, right? Pro pitchers need individualized training to continually develop in the offseason, obviously because this is their job. I'm just going to open it up. How do we in here feel the pro side of it? Obviously, we talked about the college side. How do we feel that the pro side needs a little bit more attention in the winter?
I think the part that I've consistently saw a theme where worked with varying degrees of professional athletes is they know what they need to do. They have a high level of talent, but they do what they want to do. And their justification is like, well, I've always been good. I don't need to do that extra stuff. I don't need to do that little stuff. I don't need that mobility, that arm care, whatever it may be. And so I think the most important piece we bring for any of the professional athletes that we work with is accountability. Like, here is the plan, here's the system, here's what our data is telling us that you need to improve on. We're going to design the plan, make sure that you're getting better, and then do that over and over again.
I think there's like a disconnect with a lot of mind of pros because obviously they've been great players a whole life. But then they get into the minor leagues and they get in Austin and they kind of just want to do what they've always done. And it's so cutthroat and the numbers are so far against you, like you can't have that mentality. Like 3% of guys that are drafted get to the big leagues. And most of those guys, it's a cup of coffee, you'll never actually make real money. So it's like to kind of just approach it as like, oh, I'm just going to kind of do what I've always done because I've always been the best player. Like, to me, it's like the worst thing. You should accelerate on the gas. Like some of the pro guys that we have in for assessments or we talk to their advisors and agents, it's like, oh, they don't want to drive an hour. And it's like, this is literally your livelihood. Like, you're a professional, like, and you don't want to drive an hour, So I think that shift in mindset is definitely something that we can provide as far as like, hey, like, you can put this, foot to the gas pedal on this.
Yeah. I think to hit on that too, it's like we're dealing with athletes that are obviously very, very good at what they do. And now to get the extra, like, little bit of what they need, we have to calculate how that's going to work. And that's where the physical assessment comes in, the force plates and all this stuff, is be able to understand, like, hey, you've reached a very high level, right? And now we need to dig deeper to be able to get the most out of the car that we have, right?
So we obviously, talking about this topic, we do deal with pro athletes in the facility. So for those of you who are like, what are they talking about? We do have knowledge on this aspect. So Cam, talk about how this winter, how have you seen the pro athletes be able to conform their training to our systems?
Yeah, so obviously every athlete is going to have things that they like to do beforehand, before coming in, getting assessed, getting our systems in place. So there just becomes communication. A lot of it, hitting side, pitching side, like there can just be a disconnect in what they're trying to accomplish versus what you're trying to accomplish just through simple like verbiage. Like they're going at it a different way, looking at it a different way. So just communicating a lot to these guys, they have a lot better idea of what their body's doing and what they need to accomplish, like Dan said, than like a high school or college guy because they've had a lot more coaching, a lot more time in this game than a younger player. So I think it really just comes down to communication, see like what they like to do, what they don't like to do, and make sure they understand like what they're specifically doing ties into what we physically see in the assessment.
Yeah. And so touching on that assessment piece, we talked a little bit about it last week of how going into a college assessment, it may be a little different than pro. How have you seen the pro assessment kind of elevate, and not in it, like we talked about the trust factor, right? How do you, starting from the assessment, allow a pro athlete to be able to trust KPI, so to say?
I think a lot of it starts with the initial sit down. They do almost all of the talking, just because they're obviously grown men. So
yes.
A lot of we have this car, this is where we need to get to, we want to get to the big leagues. Okay, we know where we need to get to. Okay, where have you come from? Give me more background on who are your previous coaches or programs you've been in so we can understand where you've been, to then know, okay, this is how you got to where you're at. So then I can be more, I guess, careful with how I talk about things as I go through the assessment. And I think that's probably a big difference where a lot of times with the other athletes, college and the high school players, it's us, me directing them. Here's what we're going to do. And so I think there's more collaboration there. And then with the The physical assessment, I think it's more layers, and then it's a little bit more nuance, just because they play so much more baseball, and so I think I look at our assessment process as more of a menu versus like, okay, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Okay, what do I need to do and test to figure out what this athlete needs? And we're continuously trying to find more and more ways to get objective data. Armcare.com, huge tool where I still do our table test, a shoulder range of motion, but we're relying really heavily on their system to give us objective data as far as arm care. Proteus, we're integrating that into power testing. So trying to figure out where is the energy leak, where are they limited from a power development standpoint, and then obviously relying on our force plates to drive the efficiency piece, like how well do you move. So I think with a professional athlete, it's a little bit more in depth there, and then I think we spend more time just talking about the assessment, just because again, they more miles in the car. So if you're, I guess the typical things that I would see in an assessment, sometimes you don't see those with an older athlete, just because a lot of time has passed, and it seems like, I guess, across the board, almost all of them, other than a handful that fall into the hypermobile, really loose athlete, almost all of them have some mobility or flexibility issues that we need to address, and that's the stuff that falls in the category like, I just want to lift today.
Yeah.
I just want to throw today. I just want to go. I'll do my bands. That's fine. Like I'll throw plyo care balls. Like I just want to do stuff that's fun and I enjoy. I don't want to lay on the floor and do my mobility for the first 10, 15 minutes of my workout, and that's probably the biggest area.
So we talked about it a little bit with the communication piece. Eric, I'm going to talk about it with you again. So being able to, and we talked about like the agents, and this is a livelihood for these kids now. We're not in college, we're not doing school. This is what we do. We do this solely to make money. How have you seen the level of communication kind of escalate when it starts to get to that point?
Well, I think as more and more high-performance kind of facilities like us pop up around the nation, it's becoming more and more competitive. So, like, the agents are like, hey, like, I need to get my guy in there because the agent makes money if they become big leaguers. The agent doesn't make money with them toiling around in minor leagues. So, like, there's a sense of desperation and a sense of urgency more so than desperation to kind of, like, get the best training there is out there. And that leads to more communication. Like, a lot more advisors are hitting us up, being like, hey, like, can you give this guy an assessment? I can't force him to train with you guys, but I definitely want him to. So how do we open that door? So I think, and we're still pretty new as a business, and we're still in that awareness phase where instead of guys just, 50 guys showing up at our doorsteps, it's more so like, it's through connections and stuff like that. So that there's been a lot of communication there with, some of the players in Northern California to kind of, get them up here, players as far as like people in the industry to kind of get more people in there. Because obviously what we do is unique.
Very unique. And I'll touch on that, right? We talk about it all the time, but the tech is where we kind of, the gold standard technology is what we kind of base our stuff off of. Cam, working with these pitchers, how have you seen, and especially some of them coming out of college, some of them coming from a pro level type of training style, how have you seen them adapt to the technology and kind of embrace it wholeheartedly?
So the crazy part about a lot of these pros is they don't get direct access to a lot of their numbers. So depending on the organization you're in, where you're playing at, some of these guys, you basically have to completely teach like what TrackMan reps out of numbers mean. So a lot of it can be like educational early on, like talking them through bullpens, what different numbers mean. But once they get that base layer of understanding, they get a lot more locked in on the specific things than a high school kid. Where they understand like the importance of vertical break for a lower slot guy or something like that, playing to basically they all understand like we need to be an outlier in some way to make it. So if they can create outlier stuff through objective data on TrackMan, then that's going to give them a better opportunity for success leading forward.
Or learn what their outlier trait is with the tech, right? That, like a lot of times the tech be like, oh, I didn't know I had this. Like that's an outlier pitch. Like let's lean into that. So
I think that in itself can become a competitive advantage, that you can be an advocate for yourself, where you're like they've already had a ton of coaches telling them do this, do that, try this grip, do this, all these things. And then once you educate yourself enough to then know, hey, like I'm not gonna I'll be nice to you, but I'm not gonna listen to you. Yeah. Because what you're saying is just doesn't fall in line with what works for me. And I can now that I understand the numbers, understand the data, I can back up what I'm saying. Where like, no, I'm gonna throw my slider like this. Because look at these numbers, like that's what we want to see. And I think more and more organizations are leaning towards that. Like again, like the outlier component. One of the pros that we had in early he was big on that. Like, and throwing hard is not an outlier anymore. everybody throws hard. So figuring out that next thing, and then going back to the assessment always starts with a very really mundane mobility, but for the professional athlete, now we need to go to the extreme performance side. Like, no, we need to know what your pitches are doing and what, like, the different movement profiles. So that's really where the money is going to be made. Like, all of that stuff in the weight room, yes, is important, but we've actually flipped the focus where we need to just get you prepared and healthy to get on this mountain as often as possible, so we can actually work on the things that are going to give you an opportunity to go to the next level.
For sure. And so, Eric, I want to ask you this question. So if you have not, please go follow Erik Wogley on Twitter. He's been doing a great job of kind of elevating the knowledge of the baseball scene in general. But we talked about technology, and we talked about how it is making its way into pro facilities. It's been there for a while. The top teams have using it. I want you to kind of talk about how people are kind of stuck in this way of thinking, oh, they're just pros. They do it the old school way. They take the ground balls, they do the BP, and then that's kind of it. Talk about how that's not necessarily true.
I think that's a whole podcast topic, what you just said. But as far as like what a person from an org point of view, I had this discussion with someone that I don't try to remember who, but it was like, it's not an accident that the Astros have been in the last 6 World Series.
Yes.
It's not an accident that Dodgers have the most regular season wins in the last 5 years. Like these are the heaviest analytics organizations in the game, and the Rays, on their payroll, that they're consistently there at the end of the year. And then these other orgs, and we won't name those names, but they seem like they're stuck 30 years ago. And it's like, what is going on? Like, don't you see what these other guys are doing? And so really where it kind of boils down to is like there's an assumption that all orgs do it that way, and that's not true. Yes. And like Cam just said, like a lot of these pro guys get in there like, yeah, we jumped on force plates, we never saw it. Yeah. We throw on a track man and then we don't see it. Like we don't see the data. So we're able to kind of take what the higher ups in their orgs are looking at and make it actionable for development for them, because for whatever reason the orgs aren't giving it to their guys. That's a whole different topic. Yeah. But in here we can give it to them. Sure. And we can kind of lean into it quite a bit with the tech and the data, and then they can go into their next season. And again, the game's moving this direction. Like what I just said about some orgs doing and some aren't, that's going to be gone in the next 10 years. It's too obvious. The war's over, right? There's small battles being fought, but the war's over. So we can kind of really push them with these numbers and let them know that, like, hey, when you walk into your spring training next year, you're going to have like a really good feel for what you need to do to advance. And I think that's pretty powerful stuff because they don't get that when they're in their season.
No, absolutely not. And so, Chase, I'll ask you, having this experience dealing with these pro athletes before, and especially being at spring training, right, understanding that this stuff needs to apply to game for these guys. Like there's no choice that we need this to apply to a game so they can get paid and understand that they can do well in the field. Mm-hmm. How have you seen, and it's not so much how have you seen technology change this, but how have you seen the mindset of using tech in the pros facilities kind of elevate the play?
It just needs, we're kind of doing what I think should be done, if I'm being honest, like in pro orgs. Like, we need to use it to validate decisions, and we need to use it to understand what is actually happening to be able to get guys to be the best that they're at. And it's not crazy complicated, like Erik said, like the war's over. Like it's not, we need to be able to understand what's happening and use tech to understand like how to get guys from A to B to get them to the big leagues. And that'll, like, to Dan's point, being able to advocate for themselves as well, like to understand all that stuff, so then they can. You're not going to get to the big leagues playing somebody else's game. You're going to get to the big leagues like maximizing your own. True. And that's where tech can really help, not only in here but in pro orgs once they start getting to that point.
Sure.
And I think it helps too, where you're not going to rely on one person's opinion. No. Like that one pitching coach, that one hitting coach. You have this one person who's got all the answers, and you're going to put your career in their hands, but all your eggs in one basket. More power to you if you want to do that. Mm-hmm. But I think a big thing for us, and we have the time with these athletes to explain and go in depth, and we've purposely set up our environment for that, so that we can create trust and credibility and buy-in, educate them and empower them, and say, hey, like this isn't Chase's opinions, not Cam's, not any of our opinions. Yeah. This is what here's what we see. Here's what the data tells us. They align. Here's the plan to improve it, or maintain it, or whatever, change it, whatever it may be. And that's our process. So
for sure. So I'm going to switch to the training side of things. So Cam and Chase, feel free at any point to chime in. But how have you seen, right? Pro guys like to feel good a lot. I mean, it's no joke that they don't want to have training that either in some cases challenges them or they have bad days, right? Because as a pro, and just as a competitor in general, you always want to be on the up and up. How have you seen it's CLA to a point, right? Because our systems just kind of inherently make that. How have you seen the bad days for a pro, and how have they, as the athlete, been able to kind of step back and go, okay, well, I did get better today. It may not look like it, but I understand that now I have this to work on.
I think the biggest thing I've noticed, since I'm probably the newest person here working with pros, the adversity side of it, like the pros in baseball are going to fail a lot. So they're used to having bad days. They know how to self-reflect and look at what quantifies a bad day. Whereas like a high school guy, if their velo's down, they're going to be pouting. They're going to be down on themselves right away after. Where these guys have the feel and the ability to know, like, hey, if my velo's down, but we're working on X, Y, and Z, and those are getting better, then that's still a good day in itself. So I think just like the overall, basically maturity of pro athletes helps a lot in that sense, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, I think on the hitting side, what we the irony behind trying to search for perfection, but then we want a big room for error, but we need the error is in that term, right? Of understanding that like we want our bad swings to have good results. Yeah. And so then it's just about understanding what that is. So it's like if you have a bad swing and that bad swing is now like actually producing more, then we know we've done a good job.
For sure. And so now, when they come in, right, and it's obviously the assessment starts first, how do you kind of get the point across that it's, like you say, in the high school, we're not guaranteeing you success, right? But for a pro, they want to hear that when they come here, they're going to get better. How do you go about navigating that system with a pro athlete?
I think right now I just heavily rely on the data and the numbers, showing like, hey, this is what we need to improve. Here's where you were. Here's where you're at. We are seeing improvement, or we have a much higher level of observation. Like we're on top of what they're doing way more. To where, like, for example, one of the guys came in, his jump profile was out of whack, and I was like, dude, you're getting worse based on our system. Hey, what are you doing for your lifts outside here? He's like, oh, well, I've just been doing hang cleans, and I've been doing this and doing that. I was like, okay, well, that's what it's showing. Like, we see that. You need to stop. Like, you do not have the time to screw around and make yourself worse. Even though in your mind you think, well, I'm putting the work in. I'm doing what I need to do. Here's what I've done. So I think relying on that and building credibility, and again, not my opinion. This is what this is telling me. Has been the area that I rely upon pretty heavily right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and from a tech side, we can get to a point to where it's calculated work ethic. And I think like that's the important thing to understand. Is like, so then when the guy goes and does his cleans, we can see it's not doing what we want it to do. So now we can shift him and say, hey, dude, you want to work outside of here? Here are the things that are going to be better for you. Yeah. Because we know that's going to work. So then we can calculate that. That work ethic that you want to put in.
I think the purpose of the we don't guarantee any results to you is more of we are going to do everything we possibly can to ensure if we give you our performance systems, they're going to improve you on the things that you need to improve on. Yeah. And so you literally just need to put the work in. You got to push yourself. Yeah. Those are the only limiting factors. That's the goal of what we do here. Is the only thing that limits you in achieving your goals is you. Yeah. Versus a lot of times the limiting factors are coaches or resources or facilities, whatever it may be. It's something outside of the athlete. And then that athlete falls in that category. Well, why even bother? Like, I'm just going to keep doing what's always worked for me. I'm good enough. I don't need to get better. I'm a big leaguer. I don't have to listen to what you guys have to say, which is totally fine. Yeah. Good luck. Have fun. And good luck making into that 3%, right? Like, you just took on a 97% failure rate. So, more power to you.
Yeah, and to that point, like how, right? I mean, we talked about it. Like they want to feel good. Like they always want to be on the up and up, like I said. But how do you kind of go about being like, hey, I understand that you want to do this, but this is what's going to help you. Like, how do you kind of navigate? I think
the feeling good is the perspective piece. Like in the long run, like right now, like this bullpen might suck today. You might get destroyed in this hitting in this round. This is gonna suck. Like this is your weakness. We're attacking. Like this point of the year, we need to attack your weaknesses. It's gonna be uncomfortable. But as long as we're on the same page, you know that, and we have the long-term goal in sight. I think that's where it becomes less of like pat you in the back and say, "Oh, good job
today."
Like if you need that from us, like you probably don't have a good shot at making it to the big leagues.
3%.
If you need outside validation, somebody patting you on the ass, like you're gonna have quite the battle to win.
It's the wrong sport.
Definitely.
We're playing a game where you're not going to feel good most of the time. Yes. So like we need to be able to maximize what you can do all the time.
Yeah.
For sure. So last point from me, right? So we talked about MLB orgs. Obviously, we're adapting this new technology system. what would be kind of like an outreach to coaches, agents, pro players from us to be, hey, we kind of see where this is going. Obviously, we're doing what we need to do. How can we get everybody on the same page?
It takes time, you know. We've talked in the past couple podcast episodes about how baseball is just a very slow adopter, and it is what it is, you know. And we have to, you know, we're playing that game right now, but just really kind of just proving ourselves. I think that's what it is. Like, hey, our stuff works. Here's why. Here's this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, and then, you know, what we're going to see as I've kind of been planning our signing day event next week. You know, we have almost 30 guys from this facility in the class of 2023 that are going to be signing an NLI or signed it yesterday, and they'll do the event with us. But it's like those guys are going to become pros in the next 4 or 5 years. You know, potential first-round draft pick just walked in the door. Like, so, like, those are going to be our guys as we grow as a business. Like, we're going to hang our hat on because they're going to be immersed in our systems, and then they're going to kind of show our worth. And people are already noticing that. You know, there's no doubt about it. But it's going to take time.
I think the best way to sum that up is that group, like, that's 6 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's 6 years in the making. So we are year 2, trying to go and prove that we can do the same thing for professional athletes. Yeah. It's going to probably take the same amount of time.
Yeah,
For sure.
It'll take time.
It's
hard.
So, yeah.
And then, you know, we discussed the challenges of pros in this area too, with the rent and then the price. Everything's sky high prices in here, and if you're a minor leaguer, like, so that whole nother thing. But like, yeah, it's tough to live in this area and be a minor leaguer too. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think over time, the systems will prove they work, and then that'll increase the credibility and trust, because that's the biggest thing with that group, right?
Yeah.
And they've already had a million coaches tell them what to do. So I think that the trust piece is what's going to help, you know, us KPI as a whole end in success. But for the athletes themselves, like seeing, hey, like, oh, that guy went there and got better, and that guy went there and got better, and then I feel like it's just going to be like 1, 2, 20. Like, it's going to be like, that's going to be likely the process. So
For sure.
cool.
All right. Thank you guys very much for listening to Talking Points with KPI, episode number 50. Once again, this was about pitchers winter training, or pro pitchers winter training, excuse me. If you would like, please go like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Kinetic Performance Institute. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We have all the platforms available with a bunch of content that you would like to see. Have a good day. Thank you.